Welcome to this video looking at how we can use some simple diagramming techniques to help us make sense of complex problems. There might be organisational issues, problems with projects you're working on, or there may be challenges in your private life. In this video I've used an environmental problem as a case study, but the principles are the same, whatever the situation. The diagrams are all drawn from techniques used in systems thinking. So what do I mean by that? Well, a system may be seen as being a collection of interacting parts which create some output affecting an external environment. We can see systems as at two ends of a spectrum. A hard system is something like a bicycle. It actually comprises a number of mechanical parts which on their own do nothing, which when we put them together create a system for transportation. At the other end of the spectrum are soft systems, which are basically things to do with living beings, people, animals, plants, that sort of thing. Soft systems are non-deterministic. We can't guarantee that when we put them all together into a system that they will behave in the way we want them to, and the output of these will be unpredictable. Systems thinking identifies three key principles. One is that the actors in a system have multiple interrelationships. They affect each other and they're affected by what the other actors are doing. There are multiple perspectives. There are different ways of looking at the situation, looking at the system. So I see it one way, another person sees it another way. And that means that the interrelationships may change, that I see some interrelationships, another person may see other relationships. And the third principle is that there are boundaries around our system. Now, again, one person may see boundaries in one place and one person in another. The boundaries affect what we see as important and not important, what is happening, what is not happening, what is interesting and what is not interesting. Boundaries are never fixed. We can never totally agree on what they are. Each person will have their own understanding of what the boundary is. But where we draw the boundary affects how we understand how the system operates. So it's important that we recognise that we're always making boundary judgments. The case study I'm going to look at to draw some diagrams is about the reintroduction of beavers into English waterways. Now, I'm not personally an expert on the subject, but to make this video I did a bit of reading on the subject. I talked to a few experts and I put together some notes and then used the diagrams to make some sense of the whole situation. So it won't be complete, there'll be inaccuracies as well. And it is the process of drawing which helps us to expose our ignorance about something. And if we are drawing these things together, if we're doing it as a collaborative exercise, these are important tools for learning. So the first diagram I'm going to do is a rich picture. It's a simple representation of who is involved in a situation and what connections they have with the other actors. So I get a big sheet of paper, a flip chart or a whiteboard, and I start drawing. The first thing I do is to draw a beaver in the middle. Now, it's not a very sort of artistic beaver, but then I'm not a very artistic person. In fact, being artistic can often get in the way because we spend too much time trying to get the diagram, get the drawing looking beautiful, when what we're really interested in is the key issues and the process of doing it. So there's my beaver. What's the first thing I thought of? Well, what beavers do. So I've drawn a diagram, I've added to my diagram a river with a dam, and the dam behind it has fish in a lake which is building up. The fish, it creates sort of an environment for insects. Insects attract birds. Beavers also, to feed, they tend to gnaw at trees, and this makes trees fall down. So I've tried to capture all of those in the upstream side of the dam. Downstream, the dam slows the flow of rivers, and this reduces the likelihood of flooding in urban areas, which I've indicated. Another thing we need to be concerned with are the groups which are pushing for the reintroduction of beavers. So here we are. We have organisations such as the National Trust, the Mammal Trust, the Beaver Trust, and others. So these are all conservation groups which are pushing for reintroducing beavers, and they apply pressure to the UK government ministry DEFRA, which is responsible for agriculture. I've indicated that they have a positive impact on DEFRA by using a green heart symbol. DEFRA delegates responsibility for implementing this to Natural England, and Natural England issues a policy and it accepts applications for licenses, issues licenses, and once those licenses are issued, a landowner can introduce beavers into their land. Who else? Okay, there's the farmers, there's the landowners, the people who own the land. Here the situation is a little bit more complicated. There are some landowners who are in favour of beaver reintroduction, the Green Heart landowners, but there are also landowners who are against the reintroduction because it makes them lose agricultural land. It chops down trees. These are issues, and so I've indicated that by a red crossed sword symbol. Farmers are represented by the National Farmers Union, the NFU, and because of a consultation exercise which came up with the fact that most farmers seem to be somewhat opposed to beaver reintroduction, the NFU puts pressure on DEFRA to restrict beaver reintroduction. Again, I've used the cross sword symbol. Anybody else? Well, we've got the media. Okay, now much of the media that I've read, which doesn't mean to say that all of the media, is positive about beaver reintroduction, green heart symbol. And that often is because it tends to focus on the downstream application of the downstream impact of beaver damming streams, because it reduces the likelihood of flood in urban areas which most media consumers live. The positive slant in media tends to stimulate an ecotourism trade. So people are, oh, I think I'd like to go and see the beavers. So this provides a business opportunity to farmers, so they can make a bit of money out of guided tours, talks about beavers. So that's my rich picture. It's important as we draw it to make sure we're aware of the process we're following. What have we drawn here? What is not here? Why did we put it there? What did we think of first? So for example, I thought of the positive groups promoting beaver introduction for the negative groups, the farmers. And that's because my own worldview is that reintroducing beavers is a positive thing. But I need to be aware of the prejudices that I'm bringing into drawing this picture. What relationships have we got? Are there any we have omitted? That sort of thing. Where are our points of agreement and disagreement? If I'm drawing with other people, what are the things we had discussions about, disagreements about? So rich pictures are very useful. The next one I want to talk about is a system map. Now, this helps us to identify which actors are part of a system and which are more connected with the environment. So I like to start off with a sheet of paper again and some small post-its, and on each of the post-its I write down who are the actors that I've identified. Then I'll reorganize them into this kind of system here. So I've got the beaver system, which is the National Farmers Union, the environmental groups, farmers, beavers, DEFRA, National England. They are people who interact to affect the environment, and the environment being the agricultural land, the watercourses. Now notice I've left the media and the ecotourists out of the system. That's because in my opinion at the moment they are reacting to what is going on in that system. Now it may be that as time goes by that it becomes more relevant to put the media and ecotourists in the system because they're playing an active part in influencing what happens. But my feeling was that at the moment, it's early days with beaver introduction, that actually they're probably best left outside. But again, it's not cut and dried, it's not a fixed rule that they need to be in or out. The next diagram I want to talk about is influence diagrams. It looks a little bit like the way I started the system map. I've got all my actions there, and what I do is I think about where are the patterns of influence. The first one I was thinking about was the NFU and DEFRA. So NFU to me exerts quite a bit of influence over DEFRA. DEFRA is responsible for agriculture, so it really has to listen to what the farmers are saying. DEFRA then influences the NFU in turn by making legislation which enables or prohibits certain activities. Now I think this influence is probably less than the powerful lobbying influence that NFU can exert on DEFRA. But I may be right, I may be wrong. But actually the discussion about that in the process of drawing an influence diagram is important. And I repeat that process for all of the relationships here. Some thick lines, some thin lines, some in-between lines representing the relative balance of influences that I see here. My fourth type of diagram is a multiple cause diagram. Multiple cause diagrams help us to understand what are the factors which are leading to a problem we've identified. So the problem I'm working out here is the resistance to beaver in reintroduction. So why is this happening? Well, two things that I can identify. There's a perception of loss of agricultural land, and there's perception of damage to the landscape upstream. Where are these coming from? Well, damage upstream is caused by beavers gnawing at trees. Why are beavers gnawing at trees? Well, they gnaw at trees which are unprotected. Why is there perception of loss of agricultural land? Well, because fields are becoming waterlogged. Why are they becoming waterlogged? Because dams that the beavers construct are getting too high. Why are they getting too high? Because there's not enough monitoring. There's not enough watching what's going on and just cutting down the height of the dams if they get too high. I can add a bit more information. I can say that the perception of loss is because that's a message which is put out by the NFU. And why does that happen? That's because farmers who are suffering from the loss of agricultural land are complaining to the NFU. So I can carry on doing this, and this gives me more and more information about the multiple causes to any particular situation. And always in a complex situation, we will have more than one cause. We will never have a root cause, a single root cause, which is what the old root cause analysis process often makes us believe. Final type of diagram I'm going to look at is the causal flow diagram. Now, a causal flow diagram is slightly different to the others. It's a fundamental part of one branch of systems thinking called system dynamics. Here I've got a causal flow diagram which illustrates an issue which is well known in environmental circles called the tragedy of the commons. It's particularly used to analyze what happens when we have a common resource. The classic example is what happens when we have common grazing, which is our resource here. So let's consider person number one. If they use the resource, they get a benefit from it. So that's a causal relationship, and I show that with an arrow from the level of the resource going up to the level of benefit going up. It's a direct relationship. I show a plus sign. As the benefit goes up, the farmer will think, well, I'm going to use more of this, I'm going to use more of the grazing, and so the use goes up. Another direct relationship, another positive sign. And that creates a loop which is reinforcing, which I indicate by that spiral. But of course, as the use of the resource goes up, then the level of the resource available may actually start to go down. So as the level goes down, as the use goes up, the level goes down. It's an inverse relationship, and I indicate that by a minus sign. As the level of resource goes down, the benefit goes down. Direct relationship, positive sign. Now that loop, use of resource, level of resource, benefit, use of resource, is a stabilizing loop, because what happens is that it will tend to sort of level out in time. So we've got two loops going on. We've got a reinforcing loop and a stabilizing loop. And which one actually becomes most significant over time depends on the levels, that how rapidly things happen. Now, of course, if it's common grazing, another person may come along and bring their cattle along. and that will mean that the level of resource will go down more quickly. So that will affect the dynamics of the first person's loop. So causal flow diagrams can help us to understand how a situation and a system may evolve over time. It's particularly sort of popular in American systems thinking circles, perhaps because of two particular books that are significant in the system dynamics world. One is Peter Senge's The Fifth Discipline, which came out in the 90s and was a very popular management textbook, which looked at management theory from a systems dynamics point of view. Peter Senge always talked about it as systems thinking, and so this has led many people to believe that actually systems thinking is just about causal flow diagrams. But there is actually a lot more to it than that. The second book is the important environmental book, The Limits to Growth, which dates from 1971. And this was the first application of system dynamics with computer modeling. And that looked at how things such as population growth, pollution, food availability, resource usage, resource availability might develop over time, and painted a somewhat gloomy picture that by the year 2030 we may be facing some very serious issues on planet Earth. So let's look at how we draw a causal flow diagram for our situation. So I put a level of something in the middle, support for beaver reintroductions. As the support for beaver reintroductions goes up, the number of beaver reintroductions will go up. As that goes up, the evidence upon its positive benefits will go up, and that will increase the support for reintroductions. A reinforcing loop. But also, as the number of reintroductions goes up, it's quite likely that the evidence of the negative issues that beaver damming can cause will also go up, and so that will have a negative impact on support for beaver reintroductions. So again, we've got a reinforcing loop and a stabilizing loop acting at the same time, and which one wins out will depend on the relative strength of the loops and also the time involved. And we can continue that by looking, for example, as the support for reintroductions goes up, the number of ecotourists will go up. That will increase farm income, that will increase support for farmers, a reinforcing loop. But also as the number of ecotourists goes up, the number of beaver tourist sites will go up, and that may lead to the market becoming saturated, so individual farm incomes will actually start to go down. So farmer support may go down. So again, a stabilizing loop, tempering the reinforcing loop, and what will happen depends on the relative strength of each. Okay, so those are the 5 diagrams I want to talk to you about here. What are the benefits of doing this? Well, it helps to give you a more comprehensive understanding of what is going on in any particular situation. It helps you to avoid thinking you have a perfect understanding. We often talk about holistic pictures. Well, actually, one of the things that diagramming helps you to do is to realize that you're never going to have a completely holistic understanding of a situation. It is always limited, and it is always shaped by your own perspectives, your own prejudices, your own theories of knowledge. If you do it with other people, if you collaborate on the drawing, then you can sort of minimize this effect by drawing in many different ideas to what we're doing. And so the whole process encourages you to think and reflect about a situation, and it identifies a range of strategies of different options that we might be able to apply in order to improve the situation we're looking at. Okay, thanks for watching this. I hope you found it useful. If you'd like to learn more about systems thinking and diagramming, you can find more information in either of these 2 books that I've written. They're both available from Routledge. One focuses very much on learning and development and shows how systems thinking can apply there. The second one looks particularly at sustainability, social and environmental sustainability, and gives us some ideas for how we can introduce learning strategies in an organization which can support organizational sustainability. Scan the QR codes. If you're interested, good luck with your diagramming. And thank you very much for watching.